Hey guys, it's Marco Hanna from PhoneDog.com. Cameras are everywhere, and some of the best photos we are now taking are coming straight off our phones. So I looked at two of the best devices and asked which one would be best. So stay tuned for the iPhone 5s and the Xperia Z1s right here at PhoneDog. These two devices are not only competing in cameras, we're going through a lot of departments to find which phone would give you the best option as your daily driver, plus having one of the best mobile phone cameras ever. The Sony Xperia Z1s is a love child of Sony and T-Mobile for a T-Mobile only version of the original Z1. It ditches the steel band in favor of a plastic one for one simple reason: T-Mobile's 20+20 network. If you don't know what 20+20 is, it's basically a really fast Category 4 network which will deliver speeds in excess of 100 megabits per second. T-Mobile is already lighting up their network now and should have a very nice wide coverage area by mid-2015. Even with the plastic construction surrounding the phone, it feels like a solid device. Doesn't creak, and you still have two pieces of crystal on the back and front. The front houses a 5-inch Trilumious IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It's a really nice display, but I can't help but pointing out that the viewing angles are just really bad. I know a bunch of you said, who looks at a phone from an angle, but it's a serious fault. For example, if your phone was on your desk and you just received the message, you'd have to tilt or pick up the phone to just read the display. But when you are looking at it dead on, you'll find the colors are pretty dead on, bright, accurate, and not overly saturated. Underneath, you'll find a quad-core Snapdragon 800 processor rated at 2.2 GHz and 2 GB of RAM. Not the most powerful, but sounds a lot better than what you're about to hear. The iPhone 5s doesn't focus on power or specs or really anything other than the experience. Its aluminum bands and the chamfered edges are just beautiful, and the two-tone color of their phones, just like the space gray, is so addicting to look at. If you peel the pretty face, you'll find rather disappointing specs, but you have to remember, Apple is not in the game of specs. It has a 4-inch display for resolution of 1136 by 620, just enough to be considered widescreen, but a sub-720p display is pretty poor. But it has 326 pixels per inch, which means you won't notice any of the pixels from a normal distance. Inside, you have a dual-core 1.3 GHz processor called the A7. It's a new chip with a totally new architecture. Based on a full 64 bits, it can unlock a lot of potential power for a lot of game developers and basically any developers out there. Also, you have a motion coprocessor called the M7, which handles all the motion pickup, which improves battery life, making sure the iPhone uses the M7 instead of the A7 for all the motion pickup. Lastly, and rather disappointingly, you have 1 GB of RAM. Same specs as basically the Samsung Galaxy S2. It's a 6-year generation device, which sounds really poor, but we'll come back to this later. So if you base your comparison by numbers, you'll find the Z1s blows the iPhone 5s out of the water. Well, you would be correct. If you were to somehow use your Z1s and iPhone 5s to, I don't know, maybe render a video, the Z1s would probably finish rendering the video in 60% of the time of the iPhone 5s. But in real-world performance, these two are basically identical, mainly due to software optimization. The iPhone is running iOS 7 and the Z1s is running Android 4.3. We have Geekbench 3 running on these two devices, and the results show the iPhone having a higher single-core test than the Z1s. This correlates that the iPhone would perform better when it's running single-core applications like the web browser, for example. Now, the multi-core scores show the Z1s ahead of the iPhone for the reason of having two more physical cores. So to test it out, we have the iPhone 5s and the Z1s on the same Wi-Fi network to load up PhoneDog.com. While the Z1s has a slight advantage of loading it quicker, the iPhone 5s has a more polished and smoother experience of rendering the entire page. No serious hiccups on the Xperia though, but the fluidity of the iPhone 5s is just unmatched. Switching gears to software, and well, I really can't say much here. Android and iOS are so far apart now that it's mainly down to personal taste. If I had done this test before Android 4.0, I would have said the iPhone hands down. Because Android in the earlier stages had fragmentation all over the place, and the skins were just at a huge peak of dragging down your phone. Now with Android Jelly Bean, Google has a little bit more control over what happens to their beloved software. And I do like Sony's skin. Not my favorite, I would totally prefer a stock Android experience, but the bits of Android are still all there, and the phone is a very quick phone. Also, it's a huge addition for anyone who has a PS3 or a PS4. The addition of PlayStation Mobile and the network applications on a Sony device just makes the experience all the better. The iPhone has a similar experience of how good it is. Customization is basically nowhere to be found. You're not going to find any way to customize this phone, but that's not what Apple's focused on. The selection of applications is surreal, and also the presentation of all the applications just look miles better than the Google Play Store. Even with underwhelming specs, the iPhone doesn't miss a beat. Ever. Just goes to show the power of software and controlling your own hardware. The battery life on these two are night and day. The iPhone's fairly tiny 1570 mAh battery lasts me a full day, but that's just. While the much larger, almost double the size of the iPhone's battery, the Z1s houses a 3000 mAh battery, which easily lasts me a day and a half of full usage, going through the night as well. Now it's to the real story, the cameras. These two sport the world's best cameras on mobile phones. The claim isn't quite true with the raw images coming off the Lumia 1020, but that just misses the point. The iPhone has focused on optics, sensor, and software. Perhaps it's the other way around. They really did design everything around the optics and sensors and made the software as good as it can be. The Z1s focuses primarily on numbers. It has an XMOR sensor for mobile, but it's smaller than the one on the iPhone. Its megapixel count is 12 more than the iPhone, which means in low light you'll have much more grain on the Z1s. But they did put a Sony G lens, which is as good as a Zeiss optic lens. The results are pretty shocking. The images coming off the Z1s are sharp, but the colors seem overprocessed. It sometimes feels that the Z1s just pushes up the highlights to wash every single detail out. And other times the colors go to different color temperatures, and well, it's basically all over the place. It seriously reminds me of using, a Sony point and shoot. You can make this image look good if you go through the settings and change everything, the same as the Lumia 1020 with its huge list of manual controls. The iPhone 5s just takes the best possible photo at any time. These are meant to replace our point and shoots, not our DSLRs. So looking at the sample images, the iPhone consistently gives a better result right out of the camera, while the Z1s captures detail, but they just look off. Video also goes to the iPhone. Both of these lack a real image stabilizer. The iPhone's the only one with a software-based OIS. The video looks much more sharp, smoother, and accurate on the iPhone. The Z1s is jumpy and the colors are not so good as the iPhone. The Z1s can take good photos, and I want to say that again. The Z1s can take good photos, but you have to tweak every single option to get the best results. The internal processing from their Bions chip is letting this down. You can even see the differences in the apps that take the photos. The Z1s is cluttered with features like defocus and info eye. Yes, they're cool party tricks, but all we want is a good camera, not party tricks to impress your drunken friends. So to go through this, you hear me favoring the iPhone. The reality is, if you want the best mobile phone camera, period, that's the Lumia 1020. If you want the best point-and-shoot camera on a phone, then that's the iPhone. If you want the best all-around phone with a good camera, that's almost a dead heat. I'm almost saying the Z1s because it's a phone that would last me all day unlike my iPhone, and maybe yes, I am getting tired of a smaller 4-inch display, but I'm sticking with my iPhone choice because it's just a better camera and it's just a better everyday user. Maybe if Sony changes their processing algorithm, maybe, perhaps, who knows? Well, thanks for watching. Make sure to follow yours truly at PhoneDog_Marco on Twitter, and until next time, my name is Marco Hanna.